All right, what's going on, good people? Welcome to the Sci-fi Express Lane. I'm your mouth on the mix, Jeff Carroll, sci-fi writer, filmmaker, comic book author, you name it, board game creator. Oh yeah, gotta add that, fingernails, back from a Kibulan. All right, so here, today's topic, or what I'm gonna kind of rant about, was kind of a product of a discussion that I had with sci-fi writer David Drake, and he's a white sci-fi writer who's a youngster to the Hinlands and that generation, and now he's a seasoned vet, elder in our generation of sci-fi writers, and we were talking about the ebbs and flows in science fiction and how science fiction really started as short fiction in science fiction magazines. And when you look at to sci-fi today, one of the ways to break into sci-fi writing is through short stories. I have yet to get into one of the main American sci-fi magazines, and I think, aside from Asimov's, I can't even pronounce the name. Asimov's Science Fiction magazine that selected Sheree Thomas as the editor. They've been slow to the gate in terms of embracing diversity. If it wasn't for Genesis Anthology from the Black Science Fiction Society and the various other anthologies that MV Media has been putting out, Black science fiction, really, short stories would have not been put out there. I did my first collection in 2011 called Sci-Fi Streets, and then I progressed to Horror Streets, and now I have Cyberpunk Streets, which are all comic books, right? Horror Streets is comic books, 2 volumes, 1 volume and 1 comic book, and Cyberpunk Streets is just coming out now. You can still support the Kickstarter. I got 1 day left. I'm gonna post this today, so by the time this goes up, it's gonna be hours left, right? Maybe 16 hours or something like that. Anyway, or less, right? So, when it comes to science fiction, which includes horror, because we go back to the birth story, Frankenstein. Frankenstein was both horror and science fiction. So both of those genres, subgenres, were started at the same time. The biggest umbrella you want to say is just speculative fiction, because again, Mary Shelley was speculating about what could happen to when a doctor tries to play God, right? And she was sending that spooky message. And when you think about it, that could have been an episode of Black Mirror, that could have been an episode of Tales from the Crypt, that could have been an episode of Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, Creep Show, all of those, because it was both horrific and, how does Twilight Zone always do it? Not necessarily a catch-22, maybe karma, some type of other thing was involved. And Frankenstein had that. So in the tradition, but however, Frankenstein was a full book, right? So a full-size novel, and it was long before magazines was created. So now, or became popular, especially for science fiction. All right, so science fiction is a short medium sparker, mostly because it's a quick idea, right? What if a meteor hit Earth? What if people had 1 eye instead of 2? What if we had 3 arms? What if we walked on our hands and not our feet, right? All of those are like quick play out scenarios. It's almost like they're products of brainstorming, almost the way I just did it. And then you say, okay, here's a little element. And you're not really writing it to have a world built around it, although every story takes place in the world. You're not writing it to show the character's origin and why they behave. You're not writing it to get into the background of the technology that produced said question or the said answer. You're not writing it for any of those big things. You know why? You're writing it just to play out that particular scenario. Now, when the story comes to longer stories, right? When they do a feature or then a full novel, or even, comic books are in the middle, right? But if you're going to do a comic book series, right, like Walking Dead, now you can go back in and flush out all of those smaller questions, like who is the main character? Where did he come from? What caused the technology? What led to the messed up thing that happened, whatever it was? Now you can get into the backgrounds of all of those. So that's why when you watch a sci-fi movie, sometimes it feels like a stretch. Like all the stories feel like stretches because sci-fi is a genre of answered questions. What if? That's the main question. You understand? Urban fiction, drama fiction set in a modern urban world doesn't really depend on a what if. Sure, what if daddy cheated on mommy? What if mommy made more money than daddy? Yeah, those are small, quick what ifs, and you can play those out, right? You can play those out and, do it in a short story. What if she fell in love with her vibrator? Okay, but then now that sounds like Black Mirror because you're just doing short fiction. Tales of the Crypt, Twilight Zone were masters of it. If you get some of these, I should have actually had a list of these short fiction magazines, but there's so many of them right now. There's so many of them. Of course, Lucas, science fiction writers and fantasy. That's, I think, the one Cherie is editor of. Then you have the one I couldn't pronounce, Asimov's, right? And then, then you have other magazines. A shout out to Fire, which is another one, which is a black fiction, science fiction magazine, which has won awards. I got to keep up with because I haven't seen one in a minute, and of course, just like with the other ones, I would love to get a story in Fire. All right. So what do you call it? My cyberpunk streets, right, is short stories, right? And why are they short stories is the same reason why science fiction existed in short story form. I'm just answering quick questions, right, just to play out the scenario and moving on. However, the cool thing about cyberpunk streets is they're within the same universe. So it's the same world, the same planet, not necessarily the same people. The people practically don't even know each other. But, in future stories, they may know and meet, or they may have heard of the particular tragedy. I'm working it out so it can be like that. And I think that's a cool thing to do, because it makes a short story feel longer than it actually is. And to be honest, all we are telling is short stories. Some of them are longer than others, but every story is the beginning of time. Every story's end is the end of time. So every story in between that is a short story. What David Drake told me that kind of made me put myself and my writing into perspective, I was talking to him, there was just a panel, I wasn't on it, but there was a panel at Science Fiction Convention which talked about ebooks and how at the time ebooks, which still exist now, was playing with the length of stories. It used to be 100,000 words was fantasy, 60 to 70,000 was science fiction, military, most science fiction stories, a regular novel. Quick fiction was 40 and up. And, those were the little paperbacks, small paperbacks, and you could still do those, but most stories wanted a thicker mass market book, and so you had to go 60,000 words. If you went over 70, it was too long. And I know that because my Harlem Shake is around 40,000, 45. It's really hard to keep it short, and I know that is crazy, but when you have a world you have to build, and you got to build up some characters, you got to build up some drama, that's going to take some words, right? It's hard to do that in 25,000 words, 40,000 words. You just get into the gritty, right? And fleshing out every element of it. But when I wrote Welcome to Boss Lady's Planet, that went 76,000. And I was feeling it. I was like, oh shoot, I wrote a longer story. But it was almost too long, and I bordered on that because 76 was a lot. However, cool thing was when I did it as a ebook, I broke it up into 3 books, and each book was about 25,000 words. So that worked and gave me an ebook series, right? However, I didn't release it. I'm an independent dude, so I put up kind of all of the books in the series up at once. And I don't even know how it's selling. It may not sell that well, but I think the novel does. And when I, start doing more of the Cyber Bay and the Cyber Rat stories where they work for Boss Lady, and that's in the Welcome to Boss Lady's world, we will see some of the sales from Welcome to Boss Lady's Planet. But yeah, so he was saying that these things flowed, and that as writers, we can't get stuck in one format. We can't get stuck in writing 60,000 words. You got to learn to write all these different types of story sizes. And that's when I was like, you know what? I'm going to embrace it. And at the time, I wrote, what's the name of The Church of God in Space, right? And that is like 10,000 words. That is a long, mammoth, short story. That's like 25 pages. And it's almost a novella, right? So when people read books, short stories and anthologies, they're good with 10, 15 pages. You start going 20, 25, now it's like taking a deep breath when you're doing all these sprints, right? Or it's like, watching a TV show. You're thinking watching something episodic, and here comes 45 minutes. You're like, where does 45 minutes fall in? Give me an hour or give me 29 minutes. Don't give me 45 minutes. So it's just, every story has their own length with the energy of Jimi Hendrix, who was like, music doesn't need to be 4 minutes long. That was a radio format. Same thing with books. Every story had their own length. However, people get conditioned to hear something in a certain amount of length. And if it's 5,000 words, 3,000 to 5,000, then you got to learn to write that. And it's hard for me, right? It was hard to start to think of an idea that could be a certain length, but now I get it. And I did it so good, like I was invited to be in an anthology, and I thought it was 25,000 words, 2,500 words, 2,500 words. And I wrote a short story. I was like, all right, cool. No, he was like, no, it's got to be 5,000. So I'm like, damn, now I got to double my story. And that wasn't a problem because I think long stories anyway. So I was able to add on another 2,500 words, and it made it straight at 5,100 or whatever. And the story was so complete. Man, it was such a fun story. It was fun before, but it was like I added on a conclusion scene that made it so beautiful, and that worked. So I say all of that to say, understanding the sizes of science fiction stories helps you enjoy it even more. as a writer is really cool because you're gonna have to flow, back and forth. And the cool thing about ebooks is that they didn't take away from printed books yet. Printed books are still a thing. People like to hold comic books, so DVDs and VHS tapes may have gone, records and CDs may have gone the way of electronics, but for the most part, books and comic books are still here. Even board games are still here. So even though we got video games and we got ebooks, we still got books, board games, and comics. So anyway, and learn to write in different sizes, think of different ideas. Sometimes a short story can be a scene from a longer story, as even, a longer story is just a few scenes in a greater story. All right, just has to have a beginning and a middle and an end. My years working with comedians also helped me write short stories, because a joke is a story and a joke is a short story. So think of it: setup, punchline. Setup, punchline. There's another part to it. I can't remember it. But anyway, thank you, and like, subscribe, make a comment, share, and that's it. All right, peace. Sci-fi Express Lane is in the parking lot. Peace.